Story 1. Sonic X. For you, gaming is about escape. When you push the button on the console, switch the PC on, you are switching the real world off and escaping to somewhere else for a while. Recently, the bright primary colors and flat backgrounds of retro games have been your escape. Sure, the graphics are virtually primitive, and the plinky-plonk music can be infuriating, but there is something about the simplicity, the fullness of the characters, and the amazing gameplay of those games that really appeals, until that is, one of those games full of bright sunshine days suddenly turns dark, until one of your favorite characters fills the screen, but instead of offering his usual wide smile and mischievous eyes, he instead offers you emptiness, terror, and the dark hollow void of empty sockets that leak some awful fluid. The music fades, the eyeless face glares out, and you realize far too late you're in his world now, skirting similar territory to infamous Ben Drown creepypasta. Sonic X is a creepypasta story based around a haunted computer game. Switching focus for Nintendo to Sega, the story concerns a version of the classic game Sonic the Hedgehog that the narrator picks up as an X-file for PC. Soon after beginning the game, however, the player begins to experience strange phenomena and realizes that this game is very different from anything he has played before, although it employs many of the same established tropes as the Ben Drowned creepypasta. For example, the concept of the haunted or cursed object, in this case a game that the user has come across in some unconventional way. Unlike the Ben Drowned creepypasta, in which the cartridge is haunted by the spirit of a previous player, Sonic X instead presents the eponymous character, an alternate version of video game icon Sonic the Hedgehog itself as malevolent entity. Rather than being human, Sonic X is something else and far darker entirely. I'm a total Sonic the Hedgehog fan, much like everyone else. I like the newer games, but I don't mind playing the classics. I don't think I've ever played glitchy or hacked games before, though I don't think I want to play any after the experience I had. It started on a nice summer afternoon. I was playing Sonic Unleashed. I liked how you get to explore the towns in it until I noticed, out of my peripheral vision, that the mailman had arrived and put something in my mailbox as usual and left. I paused my game to go see what I got in the mail. The only thing in the mailbox was a CD case for computers and a note. I took it inside. I looked at the note first and realized it was from my dear friend Kyle. Let's just call him that, whom I hadn't heard from in 2 weeks. I know that because I recognized his handwriting, though what was weird is how it looked. It looked badly written and scratchy, and somewhat difficult to read, as if Kyle was having a hard time writing it down and did it in a hurry. This is what he wrote. Tom, I can't take it anymore. I had to get rid of this thing somehow before it was too late, and I was hoping you'd do it for me. I can't do it. He's after me, and if you don't destroy this CD, he'll come after you too. He's too fast for me. Please, Tom, destroy this godforsaken disc before he comes after you too. It's too late for me. Destroy the disc, and you'll destroy him, but do it quick, otherwise he'll catch you. Don't even play the game. It's what he wants. Just destroy it, please, Kyle. Well, that was certainly weird. Even though Kyle is my best friend and I haven't seen him in 2 weeks, I didn't do what he asked me. I didn't think that a simple gaming disc would do anything bad to him. After all, it's just a game, right? Boy, was I wrong about that. Anyway, I looked at the disc and it looks like any ordinary computer CDR disc, except it had black marker on it written Sonic X, and it was much unlike Kyle's handwriting, meaning that he must have gotten it from someone else, like a pawn shop or eBay. When I saw Sonic on the writing of the CD, I was actually excited and wanted to play it. Since I'm a big Sonic fan, I went up to my room and turned on my computer and put the disc in and installed the game. When the title screen popped up, I noticed that it was the first Sonic game. I was like awesome. Because like I said earlier, I liked the classics. The first thing I noticed that was out of place was when I pressed start. There was a split second when I saw the title image turned into something much different, something that I now consider horrifying. Before cutting to black, I remember what the image looked like in that split second before the game cut to black. The sky had darkened. The title emblem was rusted and ruined. The Sega 1991 was now instead Sega 666, and the water had turned red, like blood, except it looked hyper-realistic. But the freakiest thing that was in that split-second frame was Sonic. His eyes were pitch black and bleeding with two glowing red dots staring right at me, and his smile had stretched wider up to the edge of his face. I was rather disturbed about that image when I saw it, though I figured that it was just a glitch and forgot about it. After it cut to black, it stayed like that for about 10 seconds or so, and then another weird thing happened. The save file select from Sonic the Hedgehog 3 popped up, and I was like, WTF, what's this doing in the first Sonic game? Anyway, then I noticed something off. The background was the dark, cloudy sky of the bad Stardust Speedway level from Sonic CD, and there were only 3 save files. The music was that creepy Caverns of Winter music from Earthbound, only it was extended and seemed to have been in reverse, and the image for the save file where you see a preview of the level you're on is just red static for all 3 files. What freaked me out more was the character select. It showed only Tails, Knuckles, and to my surprise, Dr. Robotnik. Now I was sure that something was up. I mean, how can you play as Robotnik in a classic Sonic game? For crying out loud. That's when I realized that this wasn't a glitchy game. It was a hacked game. Yeah, it definitely looked hacked. It was really creepy. But as a smart gamer, I wasn't scared, or at least I tried not to be. I told myself that it was just a hacked game, and there's nothing wrong with that. Anyways, shaking off the creeped out feeling, I picked file 1 and chose Tails. And when I selected and got started, the game froze for about 5 seconds, and I heard a creepy pixelated laugh that sounded an awful lot like that Kefka guy from Final Fantasy before. Cutting to black, the screen stayed black for about 10 seconds or more. Then it showed the typical level title thing, except the simplistic shapes were different shades of red, and the text showed only Hill, Act 1. The screen faded and the level title vanished, revealing Tails in the Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1. The music was different, though. It sounded like a peaceful melody in reverse. Anyway, I started playing and had Tails start running like you would in any of the classic Sonic games. What was odd was that as Tails was running along the level, there was nothing but flat ground and a few trees for 5 minutes. That was when the peaceful music started to lower down into slow, deep tones very slowly as I kept going. I suddenly saw something and I stopped to see what it was. It was one of the small animals lying dead on the ground, bleeding. That was when the music started to slow down. Tails had a shocked and saddened look on his face that I never saw him have before, so I had him move along, and he kept that worried look on his face. As he kept moving, I saw more dead animals as Tails moved past them, looking more and more worried as the music lowers, and he moves past more dead animals. I was shocked to see how they all died. They looked like somebody killed them in rather gruesome ways. A squirrel was hanged on a tree with what appeared to be his entrails hanging out. A bunny had all four of his limbs torn off, and a duck had his eyes gouged out and his throat slit. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw this massacre, and apparently so did Tails. After a few more seconds, there were no more animals, and the music seemed to have stopped. I still kept Tails to continue. After a minute passed after the music stopped, Tails was running up a hill, and then he stopped. It wasn't until I saw why. Sonic was there on the other side of the screen with his back against Tails, with his eyes closed. Tails looked happy to see Sonic, but then his smile faltered, obviously noticing that Sonic wasn't responding to him, if not acting as if he was totally oblivious of Tails' presence. Tails walked slowly towards Sonic, and I noticed that I wasn't even moving my keyboard to make him move, so this had to have been a cut scene. Suddenly I began to have a growing feel of dread as Tails walked closer to Sonic to get his attention. I felt that Tails was in danger, and something bad was going to happen. I heard faint static growing louder as Tails was but inches away from Sonic and stopped and stuck his hand out to touch him. That foreboding feeling in my gut was growing stronger, and I felt the urge to tell Tails to get away from Sonic as the static grew louder. Suddenly, in a split second, I saw Sonic's eyes open, and they were black with those red, glowing dots, just like that title image. Thought there wasn't a smile. When that happened, the screen turned black, and the static sound was off. It stayed black for about 7 seconds, and then white text appeared forming a message, saying, "Hello, you want to play with me?" At this point I was creeped out. I didn't want to continue with the game, but my curiosity got the better of me when I was taken to a different level with the level title now saying hide and seek. This time I was in the Angel Island level from Sonic 3, and it looked like everything was on fire. Tails looked as though he was scared out of his wits this time. He actually looked at me and made frantic gestures to me as if he wanted to get out of the area he was in as fast as possible. I was starting to get freaked out by this. I mean, Tails was actually breaking the fourth wall, trying to tell me to get him out of there. So I pressed down on the arrow key as hard as I could and made him run as fast as he could. A pixelated version of that creepy theme when you meet Shadow at the Ark as Robotnik from SA2 was playing as I made Tails trek through the desolate forest, trying to help him escape from whatever he was trying to run from. Suddenly I heard that creepy laugh again, that awful Kafka laugh. Right after 10 seconds have passed as I helped Tails run through the forest, and then I started seeing flashes of Sonic popping everywhere on the screen, again with those black and red eyes. The music changed to that suspenseful drowning jingle as I see Sonic behind Tails slowly gaining up on him flying. Sonic wasn't running. He was actually flying. The flying pose his sprite was making looked very similar to Metal Sonic's flying pose in Sonic CD, except it was just Sonic and he had the black and red eyes again only. This time he had the most deranged looking grin on his face. He looked as though he was enjoying the torment he was giving the poor little fox as he gained up on him. Suddenly, when Tails tripped another cutscene, the music stopped and Sonic vanished. Tails laid there and started crying for 15 seconds. The scene was rather upsetting to watch, and I kind of teared up myself. But then Sonic appeared right in front of Tails, and Tails looked up in horror. Blood started to come down those blackened eyes of Sonic's as a grin slowly grew from his face as he looked down at the horrified fox. I could do nothing but watch. Just in a split second, Sonic lunged at Tails right before the screen went black. There was a loud screeching noise that only lasted 5 seconds. The text returned, only this time it said you're too slow. Want to try again? And then that god-awful laugh came with it. I was so shocked by what had happened. Did Sonic murder Tails? No, he couldn't have. He and Tails are supposed to be best friends, right? Why did Sonic do that to him? I shook the shock off as I was brought back to the character select. The save file that had Tails was different. Tails was no longer in the box itself, but in the TV screen itself, which was flickering with that red static. Tails' expression scared me. His eyes were black and bleeding. His orange fur had gone black, and he had an expression of anguish on his face. Trying to ignore it, I picked Knuckles next. The laugh came again, and the screen cut to black again and stayed there for another 10 seconds. This time, the level said, "You can't run." I was really freaked out by now. I couldn't really tell if this was a glitch or a hack or some kind of sick, twisted joke, or anything really. But despite my fear of what happened next, I kept playing. The next level looked much different. It had the ground of the scrap brain zone, but the sky background looked like the main menu. It had the dark, reddish, cloudy sky, but it was the music that creeped me out the most. It sounded like Kaiga's theme right after you beat Pokey in Earthbound. I also noticed that Knuckles looked afraid just like Tails did, though not as much, more. Rather, he looked a little unnerved. He broke the fourth wall, just like Tails, and looked as if he wasn't sure about going on. But I made him move anyway. He ran down the straight pathway in this dark level, and as he did, the screen started to flicker red static a couple times, and then that maddening laugh came again. Then after a few seconds of running, I noticed several bloodstains on the metallic ground. I felt a growing sense of fear again, thinking something horrible is going to happen to Knuckles. He looked nauseated walking down this blood-stained road, but I still kept him going. Suddenly, as Knuckles ran, Sonic appeared right in front of him with those black and red eyes, and then red static appeared again. When the static vanished, showing nothing but black screen with text saying "Found you," I was now scared. Sonic found Knuckles already. What was going on? Anyway, red static came again, and then I was back to the level. Knuckles looked like he was panicking, and Sonic was nowhere to be found. And this time that high-pitched squealing from the Silent Hill 1's final boss was playing. Was this some kind of boss battle with Sonic? I hoped to God it wasn't. Honestly, suddenly Sonic appeared right behind Knuckles in what appeared to be pixelated black smoke. I made Knuckles turn and then punch Sonic, but Sonic vanished in black pixelated smoke before I could even land a hit. That terrible laugh went off again. Then Sonic appeared behind Knuckles again, and then I made him punch again, and Sonic vanished again laughing. Knuckles was panicking even more, and Even I felt like I was going crazy. Sonic was practically playing with us. He was playing a sick, twisted little mind game with me and Knuckles. Another cut scene played as Knuckles fell to his knees and clutched his head. Sobbing, I felt his agony. Sonic was actually driving us both crazy. And then, in a split second, Sonic lunged at Knuckles, and the screen went black with another distorted screeching noise that lasted for at least 3 seconds. Another text message appeared. So many souls to play with, so little time. Would you agree? What the hell? Just what is going on? I started to think Sonic was actually trying to talk to me through the game, but I was too scared to think that. I was brought back to the main menu, and this time the second file box had Knuckles in the TV screen. His red forehead darkened to a reddish gray. His dreadlocks were dripping with blood, and his eyes were black and bleeding too, and he had a look of sadness on his face. I began to think that those are the actual characters trapped in those TV screens on the save files, but I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. So I shut off the game and took a break. I took a nap, which I hadn't, 'cause I then began to have the most disturbing nightmare. I was in pitch-black darkness, though I was under the light given off by a lamp that hung high above my head. I could hear the cries of Knuckles and Tails nearby. They were saying stuff like, "Help us," and "Why did you give us to him?" and "Run away before he gets you too." Their cries died out as I then heard Sonic laugh. His laugh, it sounded a lot like the distorted Kefka laugh. "You're a lot fun to play with, kid, just like your friend Kyle." Though he didn't last long, I was scared, looking around for the source of the voice. "Won't be long now until you join him and all my other friends." I saw him walking toward me, flickering in and out in several directions. "You can't run, kid. You're in my world now, just like the others." When he grabbed me and I saw his bleeding black and red eye, grinning face, I woke up with a fright. After a couple of hours, I decided to continue playing the game. I don't know why, but I had to know. I had to figure out why this was happening. So I turned on the computer, turned on the game, and selected Robotnik next. I still thought that was wacky, playing as Robotnik, but anyway the level title appeared again, and this time it said, which I found really freaky. This time I was in some kind of hallway. Didn't really look like it was from any of the classic Sonic games, though it has the pixelated style. The floor was shiny and checkered. The walls were a dark grayish-purple with animated candlelights and a few dark blood stains here and there was a dark red curtain hanging above on the top part of the screen. Every 12 seconds or so that red curtain sways very slowly, that whenever you're playing the game, you can barely see it move. The music was oddly pleasant. A piano played a rather sad yet peaceful song, but I knew better. This was the song that played in Hill Act 1, only it wasn't in reverse. Robotnik didn't look entirely nervous like Tails and Knuckles did, but he did have a suspicious look on his face, as if he was just a bit paranoid. He did a little animation when I just left him standing. He turns his head to the left and then to the right at least twice, and then shrugs at me, as if he has no idea where he was or what was going on. Even though I was scared out of my mind about what was going to happen, I had Robotnik continue onward. He did his usual running animation, you know, when you've beaten him at the end of a classic Sonic game, and you chase him as we continued going through the hallway. Then I stop at a long flight of stairs leading downward. Now I was nervous. Even Robotnik seemed unsure of himself. though I pressed onward. As I led Robotnik down the stairs, I noticed that the walls have gotten darker and more reddish. The red torches are now an eerie blue. Then we landed onto another hallway. This one was longer than the last one, or at least it felt like it. And then we headed down another flight of stairs down. This one was much longer, took at least 1 full minute, and then I heard that horrid Kefka laugh again, and then the music slowly faded until it was quiet. As it did, the walls turned more dark red, and the torches were a black flame now. When Robotnik landed onto the third hallway, I noticed he now looked really creeped out, though he tried to hide it. I couldn't blame him. I was scared too. Suddenly, Sonic popped right in front of Robotnik the same way he did Knuckles, and then red static. The red static lasted for about 15 seconds, and then it showed me a most unpleasant image. The image showed a hyper-realistic of Sonic standing in the darkness where you can only see his face. All his head and torso faded into black. And when I say hyper-realistic, I mean like he looked so real you could actually see the lines in his blue fur, as if you could actually feel the fur if you touched the screen. His face, oh God, he had the most horrifying smile I had ever seen. And that's saying something, considering I saw that image at the start of the game. His eyes are wide and black, and once again crying blood, which also looked hyper-realistic. Then there were 2 small glowing red dots in those black eyes staring right at me, as if staring into my mind. His grin was wide and demonic. It literally stretched to the sides of his face like a Cheshire cat, except Sonic had fangs, very sharp fangs, much like the werehog's teeth, except more vicious-looking, somewhat yellowish. And from the look of it, he had stains of blood and small bits of flesh on his lips and fangs as if he ate some animal. I stared at that gruesome image for a good 30 seconds, never taking my eyes off it. I felt as if he was actually looking at me, smiling at me, that face. It just took 10 seconds for it to etch itself into my brain for good. Then the screen flickered with red static again 3 times, and on the 3rd time I heard the Kefka laugh, except this time it sounded distorted, demonic even. It went back to the image again, except this time there was the text again, though it was messed up. But it was pretty much one of the most horrifying things I looked at since I had this game. I am God. It was when I read that message while looking at Sonic when it hit me. I realized right there and then this Sonic was a monster, a pure evil, sadistic, all-powerful, nightmarish, demented monster. And all of his victims, including Tails, Knuckles, Robotnik, and possibly Kyle, are just his little toys. And the game is the very gateway into his chaotic, nightmarish world, and the very hell his victims are trapped in. Suddenly, in an actual split second, I screamed as Sonic lunged at the screen, screeching loudly with his mouth wide open to an unnatural length, revealing nothing but a literally spiraling abyss of pure darkness before the red static came again, this time much louder and distorted, so loud that it hurt my ears. I yelled and grabbed my ears as the red static screeched for a good 7 seconds. Then it stopped and showed nothing but black screen. As I sat there staring at the black screen, one last text came up, ready for round 2. Tom. The Kefka laugh, now sounding more clear as if Sonic was right behind me, played again 3 times as I looked at that text in shock and confusion. Then I got booted back to the main menu, and this time the 3rd save file had a TV image of Robotnik in the same tormented state as Tails and Knuckles. Robotnik's skin turned a dull gray, his mustache drooped and had blackened. His glasses broke, and blood is coming from them, and he had a mere dead-like expression on his face. I looked at Tails, Knuckles, and Robotnik, and I cried a bit. I pitied them for the agony they're going through. They were forever trapped within the game, forever tormented by that horrid hedgehog, and always will be. Then the computer shut itself off. I couldn't turn it back on no matter what I did. I sat there for maybe 25 seconds, horrified by what had just happened. Sonic is the very embodiment of evil. He tortures people who play his game in more ways than one, and then when he gets bored he drags you into the game, literally drags you to hell, where he can play with you always as his toy. I can't get the game out of my computer. I think it's stuck in there, but at least I managed to turn it back on now. After I sat there for 25 seconds, I heard a voice right behind me, like a whisper. "Try to keep this interesting for me, Tom." I turned around to see where the voice came from, and what I saw made me scream. Sitting on my bed, staring right at me, was a Sonic plushie, smiling with bloodstains under its eyes. Story 2. Turkey Molar. The unknown is terrifying. Sometimes not knowing is better than knowing. I'm telling my story now because I received another email on Monday from Turkey Molar. I figured that I should let others know, just in case somebody else receives a similar kind of email. It all began in September. I'm a sophomore in college, and in September I was getting ready to study abroad in Glasgow, Scotland for a semester. I was really excited to get away from the States and carve out a new life experience for myself. The night before I left, I was sending off one last email on my work account. I had been working as a research assistant on a farm run by Indiana State University, and I was emailing my supervisor some of my thoughts about an experimental kind of fertilizer being tested on lettuce, and I told him to have a good year and I would see him next summer. I sent the email and refreshed my inbox one last time, not really expecting anything, and I hovered the mouse over the sign out button, but there was a new email. I expected it to be an automated message from my supervisor saying he was out of the office or something, but no, it was from somebody named Turkey Molar, with the address email protected, and the subject line read, Turkey Molar, excessive. That's what I thought. I was a little bit surprised and confused because this was an account run by ISU that I only used for my work on the farm. I opened the email. It was a very short but strange message. It said, "We are almost there. We need you," followed by a link to an image on a website called Cherub Clipart. Yep, it's an entire website devoted to pictures of cherubs. This particular image was of a cherub pulling an enclosed yellow wagon, with a guy in green sitting on a seat in front directing him with reins, and there seemed to be a lot bags and letters on top of it, like mail or something. What the hell? Someone was being stupid. I logged out and shut down my computer and went back to packing some last-minute things. I really just thought it was a harmless email that was supposed to be a joke, but it was weird. Well, I left for Scotland and pretty much forgot about Turkey Molar. It's fun being in a new country far away from home where the drinking age is 18. I'm 19. I live in an on-campus flat, and my flatmates are all pretty cool. We go out and party a lot and do all sorts of crazy things. You know, typical college guy stuff involving girls and tighter costumes and body shots classes themselves are pretty boring. I'm mostly taking science courses, but I'm also in a Scottish history class that bores to meet tears. I skip most of those lectures because the professor doesn't take attendance. Last weekend, I decided to take a trip to the Isle of Skye. I thought it'd be kind of fun to travel by myself to a place and be all cool and independent. And I'd always wanted to visit the Isle of Skye. So after my marine biology lecture on Friday, I left on a train to Mallaig, where I got on a ferry and arrived at the Isle of Skye. Man, talk about beautiful. I got in around 4, just when the sun was starting to go down. Yes, it was actually sunny in Scotland for once. The sky was pink and orange, and made the dark jutting mountains look like a painting. It was one of the most gorgeous sights I have ever beheld. Seriously, I wish I could go back and visit again. Actually, not really. I took a bus to the village of Broadford and checked into my hostel. It was nice, very clean, and very tasteful. I was staying in a 3-bed Dick's dorm, so I'd be sleeping with 2 strangers who could be male or female. Surprisingly, the beds in the dorm were really nice and comfortable and not the hard bunk beds that you usually find at a hostel. I lay down to take a short nap. I was woken up an hour later when a girl came into the dorm. Her name was Marie P. something. She was from France, and she was one of my roommates for the weekend. I introduced myself, and we made small talk. She was studying geography at the University of Edinburgh. She was also kind of cute. We decided to go find something to eat, and just as we were leaving, this huge guy came into the dorm. He wasn't fat, just really tall and built. Marie and I said hello and introduced ourselves. "Hello, I'm Turkey Molar," the guy said. "Yeah." I was like, "What? Did I hear you right?" I had completely forgotten about Turkey Molar ever since the night I got the email. But now here I was thinking about it again. "I'm sorry, I didn't get that," I said. "Doogie Miller, short for Douglas. Nice to meet you. Oh, Doogie Miller." He had a really thick Scottish accent. I had just misunderstood him, but still. The 2 names sound kind of alike. Doogie was from Skye itself, in a northern town called Portree. I asked Doogie why he was a hostel here if he lived here on the island, and he said sometimes he just liked to get in his car and drive away from home to get away and meet other people. We all went out to dinner and got to know each other a little bit more. We had a few drinks at the restaurant, but Doogie wanted to drink even more, so we went out to a little pub afterwards. It very local and filled with big burly Scottish men, but it was fun, and we all had a nice time. We were all a little drunk on the way back to the hostel. Once we got back, we decided to go to bed early so we could get up early and use as much daylight as possible. Doogie had volunteered to bring us up north and give us a tour of the land and some of the geographical features. I made sure to plug in my camera so it was fully juiced up for the next day, along with my iPod Touch. We all fell asleep pretty much instantly, the day's travels and alcohol taking a toll on us. The next morning, Doogie drove us up his town, Portree. He showed us around town for an hour or so, and I tried to take pictures, but my camera wasn't working. I opened it up and saw that the memory card was still there, but the battery was gone. I asked Marie and Doogie about it, but they both denied doing or knowing anything about the battery. It was very strange, because the green battery light came on when I charged the camera last night, and us 3 were the only ones with access to the dorm. I was pretty pissed because this was a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and I wanted to remember it. Nobody else had a camera either because Marie had hers stolen in London, and Doogie didn't need one. I had my pot touch, though, so I was at least able to snap some grainy pictures. I'm still pissed about the battery. After Portree, Doogie drove us even further north to this really cool place called the store. The store is this big rocky hill, and front of it is this area called the sanctuary with all of these really twisted, odd-shaped rock formations. It was a really neat place, and we lucked out with another sunny day that was cool, but not terribly cold. Doogie showed us his favorite place in the sanctuary, a hollow with a small pond in the center. It was very picturesque, with the cool rock formation surrounding it, and the store looming in the background behind it against a blue sky with only a few wispy clouds. We went to the water's edge, and I was surprised how clear it was. You could see the rocky bottom, although I didn't see any fish. I found a really cool stick that looked like a Harry Potter one or something. It was really smooth and curved, a foot long or so. I heard a splash, and there was Doogie on his back in the pond. We asked him if he was okay, and he said, yeah, he must have slipped. He got out and was shivering, so I got my towel from my backpack and offered it to him, which he accepted. He dried off his head and then looped the towel around his neck, and we went on our way up into the store. It was a really steep path and kind of treacherous, with a lot of loose rocks and narrow squeezes. We stopped at a flat outcrop of rock and ate sandwiches we had bought in town. While we were eating, Doogie asked us if we wanted to see something really secret and really cool. Marie and I said sure, so after lunch, he took us off the path and to the edge of hill, which was basically a cliff. He pointed at a small hole in the ground at the base of a big rock. Down there, he said, we asked him what it was. A secret cave that no one knows about. You have to swear not tell anyone. I examined the hole, but all I could see was some faint light. I couldn't make anything out, but I did hear something. It sounds like music, I said. Doogie said it was probably the wind. I put my ear right up to the hole, and it definitely sounded like music. It sounded really far away and kind of muffled. I was mystified, but Doogie just shrugged and said he would lead us down to the entrance of the cave. He brought us down a narrow ledge on the cliff face. It was actually kind of terrifying being this high off the ground, with the window blowing around us on a ledge that couldn't have been more than 2 feet wide. Below us were lots and lots of rocks. The view was pretty, though, and I was able to snap a few photos with my iPod. We came to a huge mass of what looked like ferns, big, gray, prehistoric-looking ferns, and here, Doogie said, he pushed through the ferns and disappeared. Are you sure this is safe? Marie asked. Doogie came back out and assured us it was, and we cautiously followed him through the ferns and the entrance they hid. We were in a pretty large cave. It was really long and narrow, like a tunnel, and the light from the hole up above and the light from the entrance faintly illuminated it. But there was something very strange in the cave. A yellow wagon stood right near the entrance. Somehow it looked familiar to me, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I also heard the same music I heard from above, except it was a little louder. I hear the music, Marie said. It's the Titanic song. Near, far, wherever you are, I believe that the heart does go on. My Heart Will Go On was playing, and it seemed to be coming from inside the wagon. I took a step towards the wagon, but then froze. On the cave floor in front of the wagon, with reins dangling right above them, were bones. It was actually a complete skeleton, and it looked like a small human, like a child or something. Marie came over and gasped. "What is this?" I asked Doogie. He just shrugged and said nothing. I kneeled down to look more closely at the skeleton, and I saw something even stranger. There were small, long bones protruding from both shoulders. Being a biology student, it was clear to me that they were wing bones. I had seen enough bird skeletons, but why were these here? What was this? The music, the wagon, the skeleton? Marie also commented that the bones looked like wings, like an angel, she said, or a baby angel, a cherub, a baby angel, a cherub, a yellow wagon, turkey molar. I thought back to the email and strained my mind to remember what the message in the email was. It was there in my brain, but it was just out of reach. The song ended, and it was quiet for like 20 seconds, and then the familiar flutes of my heart will go on started up again. "Isn't this place very interesting?" Doogie said. "No one else knows about it." I looked at him. He seemed so nonchalant. I went up to the wagon to examine it. There was a little window on the side, and it was completely dark inside. I reached into my pocket for my iPod so I could use it as a flashlight, but it wasn't there. I searched my other pockets, but no iPod. I asked Marie and Doogie if they had seen it, and both of them said no. Well, I know I had it, I said angrily, because I had had it less than 5 minutes ago outside, taking pictures. I searched my pockets again, but it wasn't anywhere to be found. "Come on," I said. "Who took my iPod?" They both acted oblivious and earnestly protested that no, they hadn't taken my iPod. I sighed angrily and turned back to the wagon. Love can touch us one time and last for a lifetime and never let go till we're gone. I hate this song. Overproduced, overplayed, and the lyrics are so generic. But I digress. There was movement in the wagon. I'm not sure what it was, but I heard something move. It was a very light movement, almost like when. "Hello?" I asked. Nothing. No movement. I took out my stick that I found by the pond. "Lumos," I muttered. No light. I was disappointed. I stuck the stick through the window, though. Something brushed against it and moved it, and then the stick was gone. Something roughly jerked it from my hand into the wagon. "What is that?" I asked Doogie. He shrugged. "I don't know," he said. "Do you want to find out?" I wasn't sure if I wanted to find out. I walked slowly around the wagon, inspecting it. When I reached the back, I turned and squinted into the faint light, trying to make out the rest of the cave. Once more you open the door, and you're here in my heart. There was another skeleton. It was probably 20 or 30 feet behind the wagon. I went over to it, and yep, it was another winged child, or maybe cherub. The bones of the right wing, though, were kind of crushed. I looked out into the gloom, and there was another one, again 20 feet or so behind this one. I went over and saw the skull was split on this one, like it had been run over by the wagon. I looked up, and there was another skeleton behind this one. It was like a giant trail of skeletons behind the wagon, child skeletons with wings, cherubs. Seriously, what the hell? I went back to Doogie and Marie. "You want to find out what's in there?" Doogie repeated. "I don't know," I said. I want to see, Marie said. I'll show you, Doogie said. He went up to the window, Marie following. He took a small flashlight from his pocket. Marie, are you sure? I asked. Yes, I believe so, she said, seeming a bit unsure. Why, I just don't think we should look. It's kind of like a trap. Doogie turned on the flashlight and began moving it towards the window. But it is inside. It is okay, Marie said. We will only look at it. Marie, some things you see you can never erase from your mind. She looked me, clearly thinking carefully about what I just said. I could tell she was creeped out by this as much as I was, and didn't really want to see what could be in a wagon in a cave full of skeletons of cherubs, or winged babies, or whatever the hell they were. Okay, I don't want to see, Marie said, coming back to me. Why not? Doogie asked with what seemed like a growl. What is it? I asked Doogie. I'm trying to let you find out, he said, his voice sounding angry. No, tell us, I said. You are safe in my heart, and my heart will go on and on. I'll show you. No, if you can show us, you can tell us, Doogie glared at me. We are almost there, he said, pointing at the door. We need you. The email, that's what it said. We are almost there. We need you. I thought about this whole situation and how creepy it was. Need us for what? I asked. The song stopped playing. Doogie just stared at us, saying nothing. Want to go, Marie? I asked. Yes, she said. Come on, Doogie, let's go. He continued to stare at us for a few moments, and then he relented. If you're so eager, sure, he said unkindly. Marie? And I went out of the cave, and he stormed out after us. As we were leaving, I heard the song start again. Doogie didn't say anything on the hike back to his car. I was kind of scared of him, partly because he was a huge guy and could do anything to us, and partly because of what just happened. But we were in the middle of nowhere and needed the ride back to town, and it was getting dark. He drove dangerously fast on the way back to Portree, but I was too afraid to ask him to slow down. He'd drop us off at a square in the middle of town. I remembered that I had given him my towel. I asked him if I could have it back. I don't have it, he said, and I didn't see it anywhere in the car. I had no idea where it was. He must have left it back at the store. Doogie gave us one last dirty look, and then turned around and drove off in the direction from where we came. Marie and I looked at each other. That had been a really weird experience. We were able to get a bus back to Broadford and our hostel. Doogie had checked out that morning, and we had a new roommate for that night. This quiet guy named James. It didn't say anything to us besides his name, but that was fine with me. The next morning, last Sunday, I got up early and left, taking a bus across a bridge back to Glasgow. Marie was staying to more days, and we said our goodbyes. She said she was still kind of freaked out about the day before, but she would try to forget it. She said she wasn't going to tell anyone because she didn't think anybody else should be exposed to that. I agreed with her. She told me she would add me on Facebook, but so far I haven't heard anything from her. Maybe I never will. Maybe it's best to forget as much as I can about the experience. So here I am, back in my flat at the University of Glasgow, mystified and trying to make sense of what happened in that cave. What was in that cave? Oh, and there's a coda to my story. On Monday, While I was thinking about what happened, I decided to check my work email to see if I had any new messages. I hadn't checked it since the night before I left for Scotland, and I had two messages. One was from way back in September from my supervisor telling me to have a good year. The other one had been sent only 2 hours ago from Turkey Molar. The subject once again read Turkey Molar. I debated for like 5 minutes if I should open the email or not, but curiosity got the best of me. I opened it. Retry soon, and a link to a YouTube video. That was all the message contained. I clicked on the link. It was a YouTube video, so it couldn't be a virus or anything too weird. But it is weird. It's only 30 seconds long, and it shows a guy or something in a black coat with a green towel over its head. And yes, my lost towel is green. The guy, I'm just going to call it a human and hope it's a human, stands there for like 10 seconds just looking at the camera. And in his hands, well, in one hand he's holding a stick. My stick, the one that whatever was in the wagon jerked from my hand. In the guy's other hand is something that's too small for me to make out. Maybe somebody has some kind of software or something that can zoom in and figure out what it is. I'm not really technologically advanced like that. And he collapses. That's the entire video. The guy enters, stands there with a towel covering his head, holding my stick and a small unknown object in his hands, and then he collapses. Oh, and you can faintly hear my heart will go on in the background. The guy in the video can't be Doogie. This guy is way too small and slender. Doogie's like 6'5" or something and at least 230 pounds or more, but I have no idea who it could be. Also, I took several videos on my iPod Touch when I had it. I'm still angry someone stole it and my camera battery. The video is framed just like an iPod video, and the quality isn't very good, like it was filmed on an iPod. So yeah, I don't know what any of this means, and I haven't shared it with anyone. But now I am. I need to get this out there so if something happens, other people know. I have a theory about what I saw in the cave. The YouTube user who uploaded the video is, of course, Turkey Molar. And this is the only video it has uploaded. In the description is the link to the cherub picture. And here's my theory about the cherubs. A cherub is basically a toddler with wings, and a toddler would only be able to drag a big wagon like the one in the cave about 20 feet, in my estimation, before collapsing of exhaustion or dying. The wagon was near the entrance of the cave. 20 more feet and it would be outside. We are almost there. We need you. What would happen once that wagon was outside? It could fall off the cliff and be dashed on the rocks below, and whatever was inside could get out. If we had seen what Doogie wanted to show us, would we have become cherubs? Would we have been forced to pull the wagon? I have no idea. It's just a theory. I can't even begin to hypothesize about what was in the wagon. I only know that whatever it is, it has to have been in there for a long time, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Doogie Miller, pronounced in a thick Scottish accent, sounds like Turkey Molar. I really hope that he fails in carrying out his master's orders. I really hope he isn't able to show somebody else what's in the wagon, because whatever's in there, I don't think it would be good for us. I really don't think it would. Story 3. My face. I'm not sure why I'm writing this right now. I'm not even sure if I am writing this now or if I am, whether the words I'm seeing in my mind's eye are the same as the words my hands are typing. I suppose the only way to find out is to check tomorrow and see if this is still here. If it is, and it still looks like this, then I'll know it wasn't some dream I was having with my eyes open. Dream. Even looking at that word right now makes some guttural part of me tense up. I'm not surprised, though. After all, my dreams are the reason I'm even awake at this hour. Everyone else in the house is asleep right now. Well, except for my mum. But she always wakes up at 4 a.m. like clockwork. Hell, she doesn't even need an alarm. I'm looking back at what I've written so far, and I realize I've been rambling. I tend to do that simply because my thoughts just get scattered like dandelion seeds when I don't completely concentrate. There's only so much concentration you can give something when you keep getting flashes of terror every time you blink. It might just be that I'm doing it so that I can stay awake as long as possible by writing. Either way, I should probably at least explain what I'm babbling about some time before my parents find me awake like this. I've been a student at London University for a year now, studying psychology. I would be in my second year, but I had to stop midway through. So this year is a resit. I was hoping at some point to be a counseling psychologist, to help people get past their problems without being the guy who forces a prescription down their throats. It went fine for the first semester. I even managed to make a few friends, which is an achievement for someone as socially awkward as me. For the first few months, I would hang out with a small group of people, all of whom shared my weird interests. We'd talk about the usual nerdy pop culture we digested that week, about how we all threw our shoes at the television when a certain character from one of our shared favorite TV shows was killed off very ignobly and needlessly by a bear. That kind of shit. Of course, as close as we got, we never saw each other outside of lecture days, which suited me just fine. I remember exactly the day that my current predicament started. I only call it that because even now, 6 months later, I still don't know what the hell it is. It was February 2nd when we received a foreign exchange student from Canada. I'm not going to name him here, partly because he wouldn't want me to, and partly because I don't want this to come back to him. It was clear on his first day that he wasn't the talkative type, so it wasn't surprising when he started gravitating towards our little clique. He seemed enthused about what we were saying, sure, and he even managed to get some of the references we flung out about some of the TV shows that was more localized to Britain, but none of our geeky bullshit would ever stimulate a reaction with him quite like his extensive knowledge of urban legends. I'm not talking sewer alligators of New York kind of legends either. I'm talking about the kind you see on the darker underbelly of the internet, the ones that make your palms sweat and give you a nervous tick while you read about them. The first time he ever mentioned his hobby was after a lecture he'd been given on the neurotransmitters involved with fear. Our lecturer, on one of his slides, put up a rather disturbing image of a dog with a malicious grin across its muzzle in an effort to demonstrate one of the technical variations of fear. Needless to say, it worked. After we left, our new Canadian friend told me and the group that he knew where that image came from, and then went into great length on the mythos surrounding what he called Smile, JPG. At one point I remember him using the word creepypasta, and one of my friends, who we'll call Michael, inquired, after the obvious quip about haunted ravioli, what he meant. After a quick explanation on what he meant, our friend continued on to say that, according to the smile dog myth, everyone who saw that image and didn't pass it on to someone else would be plagued with nightmares from the creature in the picture. After joking away the macabre subject and going our separate ways, I took the Canadian aside, curious about where I could find the original story. At that point, I thought it might give me a good laugh, and when he told me to listen to a narration on YouTube for the best effect, it didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Of course, being the cynical asshole I was back then, it did make me giggle a little to think that something as simple as a Photoshop picture of a husky could inspire such fear in people. But ever more curious, I kept going into the topic of creepypastas to see what else I could find. Most of it was the same shtick about being stalked by creatures with no face or eyes as big as dinner plates, with claws the size of your arm, or the trope about some kid picking up a bootleg copy of a nostalgic game only to find out that the main character had been warped into some sadistic shadow of its original self. But some of them actually sent a real, visceral chill down my spine, which really surprised me. I think by about 2 a.m. the next morning, I'd watched about 20 different videos of narrated creepypastas, and I was about ready for bed. I didn't have anything resembling an early morning lecture the next day, but I knew I'd have to be up and about by around 10 o'clock. Now, I always considered myself a rational human being, not prone to believing in boggarts and the sort. But for the life of me, I swear I couldn't keep my eyes closed for 5 seconds without flinching from some gut feeling that there was another presence in my room, and in my mind's eye it kept metamorphosing from one form to another, and after around half an hour of my futile attempt at sleep, I decided that enough was enough, and that I should go into the kitchen and get something to calm myself down. As soon as I put my hand on the wood of the kitchen door on my way back to my room, a sense of danger jabbed at me inside my stomach, just like it had before in my room. I got that same irrational feeling that I wasn't alone, and I spun around, my eyes scanning every facet of the brightly lit kitchen, even checking the doors of some of the cabinets, and saw nothing. I sighed, knowing that my binge on horror stories was getting to me, and that it was my own fault for listening to so many of them, especially so late at night. So I went down the corridor and back to my room. As I opened the door, I did my best to swallow down the feeling of dread that was accumulating in my gullet like a stone, and when it was open all the way, I had to take a step back for a second. My breathing picked up as I stared wide-eyed at the empty space where my bed once sat. Everything was gone, from the crates underneath to the posters on the wall, leaving a barren, white-walled corner. As I stared in disbelief, I heard a soft, muffled whisper of a chuckle from one of the nearby rooms. Thinking that maybe one of my roommates was playing a prank on me, I smiled and looked back at the door behind me that led to Jenna's room. Jenna was the only person I got along with on my corridor, and she even showed up in some of my lectures. Her sociology course sometimes overlapped with my own. I quietly knocked on the door, and when I heard the lock click, I came in ready to confront her. "All right, Jenna, I know you took my bed, so..." My words died in my throat as I looked into Jenna's room, or what should have been Jenna's room. As I gaped blankly through the doorway, I saw my room exactly as it was, right down to the last detail, and sat on the bed was a young man with bedraggled red hair, exactly the same as mine, looking down at the floor. He was making some sort of sound as he held his face in his hands, and to this day I still don't know whether it was laughing or crying, but it was a wheezy, choked noise that ran through me like a cold breeze. I dared not move. I didn't even blink, though my eyes were becoming itchy and irritated. I blinked once, and in that short time between closing my eyes and opening them, something flashed against the inside of my eyelids too quickly for me to figure out what it was. And when my eyes opened again, I was face down against the keyboard of my computer, which had grown tired of waiting for me to turn it off and gone into standby. I let out a haggard, relieved breath. It was only a dream, just a bad dream. I was reassured the next night when my dreams returned to normal. Hell, I don't even remember what I was even dreaming about that night. All I remember is waking up the morning after, like I always did, and getting on with my day. It was a long lecture day, though, and I remember being almost completely wiped out when I left the lecture hall at 6 p.m., cursing my allergy to caffeine. I would have killed for an espresso right then. I remember feeling slightly on edge as I walked the path back to my hall of residence. I put it down to the cold wines and the darkness at the time, but I couldn't shake that ominous feeling I held in my gut as my eyes darted around the darkened campus grounds. It was that same feeling as in my dream, that feeling of being watched. I heard a sound against the wind buffering my ears. It wasn't quite a giggle, but it wasn't quite a sob, and it seemed choked and gargling, as if both had been stuck in the throat of whatever had made it and formed some odd chimera of the two. The hairs raised on the back of my neck. I knew that noise, the sound, was getting closer with every quickening step I took, and no matter how hurried my stride it gained on me, I knew I'd look like a pussy to whoever was watching. But I had to run. The sound was right in my ear by the time I touched the front door of my hall. I jerked awake and looked around at the emptying lecture hall. I'd dozed off again. I was, as you can guess, as unnerved as they come when I left the lecture hall. My hurried pace was brought into question several times by my friends, but unwilling to talk, I brushed off their questions, placated by my repeated insistence of it's nothing. Really, I'm just being silly. They decided to leave me be and go off, disgruntled, in another direction. It was about 6:15 when my hall was in sight again. That was when I heard that nose, that goddamn choking laugh again echoing in the distance. This time I knew not to take my chances. I bolted, and as my legs pounded and my body lurched forward from abject fear, I heard the giggle slowly ascend into a mangled cackle that grew louder and more fervent as I ran. I didn't even make the door before I felt a hand clutch my throat. I awoke again in my room and looked at the clock, which had long since abandoned trying to wake me up. I recoiled in surprise. I'd woken up at 8:30 p.m. I had to check twice to make sure it was in fact evening time, and not just early in the morning, what it was. I'd slept through an entire lecture day. Up until that point, I'd never done that before in my life. Hell, I didn't even take sick days when I was a kid, but now I'd missed a whole day for no reason. But still, from the dream, I would have sworn I was in the lecture. The worst part was that was the pebble that set off a snowball. My dreams became worse and worse for the next few weeks. I'd awaken several times every night in a hard sweat and have to gnaw a little at the same spot on one of my fingers just to make doubly sure I was awake. If it drew blood, real blood that I could taste, and I felt real pain from it. Only then would I calm down. I had a bandage on my finger for weeks, and people were starting to notice that creature thing that I saw sitting on my bed was there in every single one of my dreams. It would always just appear in random places in my dream environments, always keeping its face obscured in its hair and always laughing that wheezy, throaty laugh, sometimes approaching me, other just keeping its distance and watching. It was almost as if it was toying with me, playing on my subconscious, irrational fears for sport. Thanks to those dreams, my sleep patterns were getting so erratic that it even got to the point where I was awoken by security after having slept for 5 days straight. Jenna had called them after having missed me at a lecture and not seen me enter or leave my room at all that week, not even to eat or go to the toilet. Missing lectures was starting to become a habit, and my grades were beginning to suffer from it. That only served to aggravate the problem, it seemed. My coursework and assignments were beginning to suffer as well, but in the most disturbing ways. I'll give you an example. At the end of February, we were told to carry out an assignment essay on the relative effectiveness of talk therapy on alcoholics and other chemically addicted people. I remember specifically that I'd finished it right down to the references and saved it before putting it away for later submission. Being a meticulous student, I had the urge the next day to check it again to make sure I hadn't missed any key points or references. It wasn't there. I checked the recycle bin frantically, thinking that maybe I'd accidentally deleted it, but it wasn't there either. I did find something else in that folder, though. It was a gigantic and punctuated wall of rambling nonsense, as if someone had gotten jacked up on cocaine and decided to write an essay on whatever random word would pop into their head until they got bored. Interlaced with the text were several disturbing images of the corpses of small animals, ranging in size from mice to squirrels. In each picture, the animal's eyes had been removed. When I checked the timestamp, it read the 13th of February 27, 1545, the exact same date and time I saved my last draft of that coursework. As time went on, it was as if my idea of reality was beginning to unravel around me. As my constant nightmares began to erode my fondness of sleep, it got more and more difficult to tell when my dreams stopped and my waking moments started. When I was in the middle of working on something, I'd begin to see hands reaching for me that vanished when I turned to look, and when my stubborn refusal to sleep faltered, I'd hear a low chuckle in my ear and bolt awake again, terrified that it was too late and it had already dragged me into another dream. Sometimes it really was. At one point I was getting so distressed by these dreams that I began entertaining the possibility, against my better judgment, that it could have been that fucking dog in the picture my lecturer used in his fear presentation. After all, the Canadian told me that it's supposed to haunt your dreams, right? Looking back on it now, it seems stupid, but I was desperate enough at one point that I actually had an email ready with a random smile. JPG picture I had lifted off Google Images just in case. I didn't need to. It showed me its face a month into the predicament. It's a face that still haunts me this very second, and I see it against the blackness of my eyelids every time I close them. It happened when I awoke one day after a peculiarly dreamless sleep. I tried not to think about it too much in case I jinxed something, but I let myself feel a small sense of relief. It was patently obvious that I was in dire need of a shower is seen, as I'd been wrestling with my predicament for weeks now, leaving little time for hygiene. As I walked into the shower room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the small mirror and nearly jumped out of my skin, having simply mistaken my reflection for someone else. It didn't take long for me to calm down and assess my appearance. My eyes had devolved to pinkish orbs of irritated veins hooded by purplish black bags of skin. It attested to my lack of proper sleep and the utter destruction of my body clock. I'd grown a thick, prickly beard of red hairs across my chin, and my hair now lay disheveled and greasy across my shoulders in long curtains. I chuckled. This shower was a long time coming. That shower got rid of aches I didn't know I had. I felt like a new man after I stepped out of the steaming glass cubicle to towel myself off. By this point, the mirror had fogged up beyond being a mirror, so to help get my hair in some semblance of order, I decided to wipe it off and sort my hair out then. And there I froze. The blood in my veins screeched to a halt, and my breath caught in my throat like a vice. The figure that stared back at me from the now cleared mirror was not my reflection. It wore my face, but I swear on my life it wasn't me. Its mouth nearly touched its earlobes, and was contorted into a horrible rictus grin filled with yellowing teeth. The skin of its face seemed stretched over, like a mask, and its hair stuck to its scalp with a layer of shining grease. It didn't have eyes. The sockets were just empty, featureless craters, made all the more haunting by the sagging black bags beneath them. Despite this fact, it still managed to look at me in a way that made my windpipe tense up like it had hands squeezing it. It laughed. It laughed that same gargling chuckle I'd heard countless times over. But this time it felt as if, between its maniacal giggles, it was forming words with its croaking wheeze, repeating the same fragmented sentence over and over. Missed you. I blinked, and the words were scratched all over the walls. Missed you, missed you. It covered every bare patch of wall, scrawled frantically. It was then that I finally snapped. I punched the mirror as hard as I could, knowing it had trapped me in another nightmare, and kept punching until most of the glass was either on the floor or sticking out of my hand. It was only after the last of my anger had given in to a crushing sense of defeat, and I slumped down into the corner, that it dawned on me. My hand was hurting. I flipped out. According to Jenna, when I asked her about it earlier this year, I was inconsolable for the rest of the day. I was just sad in the shower room next to the pile of broken mirror shards, letting my hand bleed out as I held my head in my hands, trembling and muttering in tongues. I apparently wouldn't even let the paramedics come near me when the ambulance Jenna had called finally arrived. Of course, I remember none of this. My parents, being the insufferable worrywarts they are, have insisted I live at home while I resit my freshman year so they can keep an eye on me. They've thrown me into a therapy program, too, for all the good it'll do me. Kind of ironic, if you think about it. I was going to be a therapist, but now I'm sitting here on the other end of the stick. I did have a mirror in my room, one of those old vanity mirrors you sometimes get on top of chests of drawers, but it's been covered up at the request of my therapist. After I told my parents what I saw in the mirror, they went white and looked at each other as if I'd just threatened them with a knife. Then, with great reluctance, they told me that when I was just turning, for I'd had an imaginary friend that looked exactly like me, with what I described as a nice big toothy smile. I called him Timmy Tom, and explained that he was born without eyes, So naturally, the best thing to do was find him a pair that he liked. It started out with household objects like sequins, buttons, and marbles. So my parents never paid much heed, but soon it became apparent that these weren't what he was looking for. That was when they found me cutting out the eyes of a squirrel, and fearing for my sanity, they had me, as they put it, they had me corrected. Even now, months into my therapy, I still have those dreams sometimes. Sometimes I'll wake up in my old bed back in the halls of residence, wondering if everything up to that point was just another twisted dream. Sometimes I'll wake up in a padded room, the screams of other broken souls ringing through the little viewing slot in the door, and wonder if I've always been there. That last one seems to be its favorite place to send me. It doesn't matter where I wake up, though. It will be in there with me when I do, giggling that mind-curdling giggle just to let me know that I'm still at his mercy, that I'm still its plaything. It's here now, just sitting in the darkest corner of my room, watching me write this, with that distended grin spread across my face. It's wearing my face. It's not even giggling anymore. It's just sitting there. It's still wearing my face. It won't stop looking at me with that goddamn eyeless smile. It's still wearing my face. Maybe it just wants my eyes. It has the rest of my face, so why doesn't it have my eyes? Either way, if I didn't have eyes, I wouldn't be able to see it anymore. Maybe it'd get bored and go find someone else to drive insane. Now there's a thought.